Good morning, everybody. And as the other speakers have noted, greatly appreciative for the opportunity to travel to Australia for the first time and share information with all of you. I hope that our dialogue doesn't end here because myself and the program officials in California have quite a bit of knowledge and information that if it is pertinent to you in Australia, we are more than willing to continue our dialogue and share with you whatever information we can to help. So I'm just going to touch on background, which you've already heard a significant amount of that yesterday and a little bit today on why we are doing what we're doing in California. I'm going to touch on the components to the program in California, not going into a lot of depth because limited on time. And then I'm going to touch on the area-wide vector control, which is something I've been directly involved in the program since 2001. Again, just orienting ourselves to California. The star is over Sacramento, which is where I'm based currently in our head office for our agency. But I spent 11 years in the beginning of this program further south in the San Joaquin Valley, where we are actively managing glassy sharpshooter and have had severe outbreaks of Pierce's disease. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be repeated, but the reason we are doing what we're doing in California, not just because of the other Xylella strains, but very much because of Pierce's disease. It's already been stated that we have a Pierce's disease issue in California. We have for decades. The thing that was new was the introduction of the glassy wing sharpshooter. So back in 2000, Wine Spectator printed a number of articles that had such headlines as Vineyard Apocalypse. There's nothing like severe damage in a growing area to get government's attention, to get growers on board. It really rounded the troops. Sandy saw it coming much before government officials acknowledged and saw it coming. But then once Temecula results of all of those vine losses happened, government got involved. So we've already touched on yesterday and today differences between our native vectors like the blue-green sharpshooter that's pictured here next to glassy wing. Yesterday there was a question about mobility of the pest for glassy wing sharpshooter. Quite obviously there's a significant size difference. Glassy wing is very mobile. It is a very strong flyer. The other thing I want to point out, and I don't remember if it was mentioned yesterday or not, but it's important. The way blue-green sharpshooter moves in from riparian areas and feeds on the edges of vineyards, you get an edge effect of Pierce's disease. Glassy wing sharpshooter, because it is such a strong flyer, will move throughout the vineyard, so you get Pierce's disease throughout. One of the other big differences is the way in which glassy wing sharpshooter feeds versus blue-green sharpshooter. Blue-green will tend to feed on the terminal ends of a vine where the tissue is soft. So in normal pruning practices, if blue-green vectored Pierce's disease, that's pruned away and you don't have infection going throughout the plant. Glassy wing sharpshooter will feed on the woody tissue as well as those terminal ends. So natural pruning practices of getting rid of that infection are much less applicable with glassy wing sharpshooter. We've talked about Xylella hosts, glassy wing sharpshooter. This just is to illustrate it is a challenge to manage a vector that loves everything. And so a lot of what we do in the program is based off of this big challenge of this pest having many, many, many hosts. And then how do you target that to contain it so that it doesn't spread across all of California? So the Pierce's disease control program is actually what the state of California calls their program. There is actual legislation at the state level in place that forms the program. It designates that there will be a staff to work on the issue. It designates that there is a statewide coordinator for the issue. So my counterpart at the state level manages that program along with his staff. All of that currently is paid off of federal dollars, which is where I come in. To transfer that funding. And again, we're trying to reduce the incidence of Pierce's disease, but the way in which we're doing that is through vector control. So we are very vector focused. We really are just buying time for the research to find us a solution to Pierce's disease. Can't overemphasize this enough. A highly cooperative program. That doesn't mean we do everything perfectly, but you have to have everybody at the table, from folks like Rodrigo at USDA's research arm. I work for USDA's regulatory arm. And then our folks at the California Department of Food and Agriculture, who are experts in their own right in implementing plant pest and disease programs. We have another unique feature in California in that we have county-level departments of agriculture. That's not typical in the rest of the United States, but for California, we also have that local-level authority of county agricultural commissioners and their staff doing work on behalf of the program. So we certainly benefit from that, and it creates another level of dialogue and another level of information for us to implement. University of California, I'm going to praise especially the folks that Jim heads up, University of California Cooperative Extension. For us in the program on the ground are critical people who are talking to growers every single day, helping to provide outreach, give information, provide information back to us in the program so that we're ground truthing what we're doing and what activities we're taking. Industry groups, can't do this without our wine grape industry partners and our table grape industry partners, our nursery partners, because nursery industry is greatly affected by the containment of this pest. Citrus, another one for us. We would not be where we are in our area-wide control without our citrus partners agreeing to do the treatments that we do. Our treatments are not mandated. I don't have any authority to force anybody to do them at the federal level. So our citrus industry really has done an incredible job in partnering with us over the past 17 years. Obviously, stakeholders in public, you can't do treatment programs in urban areas without a significant amount of outreach and explaining and notifying of the public of what treatment crew might come into their backyard to do a treatment. So I'm going to touch on these elements of the program, and there was a question about funding yesterday. So the containment, the statewide survey activities are all federally funded at this point. The rapid response activities, if it's trapping, again, federally funded, but the actual treatments that we do in an urban setting currently are funded by our wine grape industry. And that's only because of the environmental requirements at the federal level that would have to be in place for federal dollars to go to those activities. We don't have those in place. So the wine grape industry pays for that. Public outreach is a combination of federal money and wine grape industry funds that pays for a lot of that. The research at this point is all funded by industry, wine grape growers, table grape growers. And then our biological control and area-wide projects are all federally funded. So annually at this point, we used to have state funding in the program. That state funding, due to intensive budget crisis in California a number of years ago, was zeroed out. So we have not had state funding since 2012, but we have industry funding and federal funding. Right now we're at about $15.5 million on the federal side that is transferred to the state of California to do the work at the state level and at the county level. So containment, Jim did a great job of giving some information on nursery so that I don't have to go into all of that. Nursery is a major pathway for us, not just with adults and nymphs, but especially with egg masses. With that slide about host list, you can imagine the number of plants that you have to inspect leaf by leaf for egg masses so that you're not shipping things and infesting counties that are non-infested. In the early days of the program, the grape industry wanted the program to shut down the nursery industry. It was too great of a risk. That obviously was not something in government that we wanted to do. And so lots and lots of work have gone into protocols. Jim mentioned an approved treatment protocol. There's a lot of trapping, inspection, and other activities that these nurseries have to do. That doesn't mean that things don't get through from time to time, but it is quite a robust system of us containing that pest. Bulk citrus is our other main pathway. We talked about a little bit yesterday, someone asked a question about glassy-winged sharpshooter survival at certain temperatures. When citrus is picked in California, it's in our wintertime. If glassy-wing is in that citrus, it will fall into the picking bags along with the citrus. Those picking bags are dumped into the bins. Glassy-wing sharpshooter can go with it. Again, it's very cool, and then glassy-wing can be shipped up the state to packing houses. That is not allowed under state regulation, so there are inspections and activities that have to be done to make sure that doesn't happen. The big difference between bulk citrus being a pathway and table grapes not being a pathway for us, table grapes are picked when it's really warm out. The low temperatures in areas where table grapes are picked, even early in the morning, are very high. It gets very warm in the areas where we have table grapes. Glassy-wing sharpshooter will readily fly away. The way table grapes are handled for us, obviously they're handled a lot by the crew. They're picked and pruned and touched and moved into boxes. That will disrupt glassy-wing, and I would be shocked to see glassy-wing moving in table grapes, at least within the state of California. So differences in temperatures and timing of how things are picked will influence that pest and its likelihood of moving around. The bulk citrus program was actually discontinued in 2005 because of a lack of glassy-wing sharpshooters being found. Mechanically harvested, again, things are shaked and moved, very warm temperatures. Glassy-wing was not found. Our statewide survey, and I've got a stack of protocols, whether it be rangeland crop trapping, nursery trapping, urban residential trapping, area-wide trapping, the hosts and the servicing timing of how you do all of that trapping. I can pass on all of that information. Obviously, it won't be perfectly applicable to each situation in a new country, but it can give you an idea of how we've handled some of our issues. Want to verify that certain areas are still uninfested, and you want to detect new populations where you can so that you can do treatments and get rid of them. Rapid response is that urban scenario. And we do only in this case call it an eradication when these small infestations are found early and are treated. There's a whole protocol that has to be met and a whole length of time that has to be met that glassy-wing is not found in order to declare an area eradicated. That's happened over the course of the program 17 times. As Rodrigo mentioned yesterday, there have been areas that have been reinfested. There have been counties that have had subsequent new infestations in different neighborhoods. Again, probably a result of nursery stock that we didn't know about moving around. I can tell you when I moved from Southern California to Northern California 5 years ago, I checked all of my plants leaf by leaf to make sure I wasn't transporting egg masses for glassy-wing sharpshooter, but that's probably not a common practice for most people in California. So something could move inadvertently. Public outreach, both with the wine grape industry funding an actual public relations firm, as well as counties doing it within the federal money that's transferred to the state. I always like to highlight Napa County because they do an exceptional job at public outreach. They have some of these signs as you drive into the county regulated area. They have nursery tags that they actually put on all of their nursery stock to encourage residents to buy locally so that you're not bringing in nursery stock. They have some kind of catchy posters that are reminiscent of old 1950s horror shows with sharpshooter rain coming down on them. Yesterday you saw that rain from that video. And they even have a glassy-wing sharpshooter costume, which will show up around town at various times. We recently eradicated from Napa County an infestation of Lobesia batrana, European grapevine moth. I worked on that program as well. And glassy-wing sharpshooter, Sharpie is his name, went around downtown with a picketing back and forth with a sign, upset that European grapevine moth was taking away its limelight. and was taking the attention away. So Napa County has a firm that they hire. They do some really good stuff. Even in their schools, they have a whole program for school-age elementary kids. They pass out little magnifying glasses and teach them how to be bug spotters in their own backyard. So some good stuff that goes on there. Research for the program is funded by the wine grape industry for the most part. They have an annual assessment that they assess themselves. It's based on value of crop per year. It can raise anywhere, based on their assessment level, anywhere from $2 million to $5 million a year. They have funded many, many, many projects. We've had 14 symposia over the course of the program. All of those research projects and those symposium proceedings are online at CDFA's Pierce's Disease Control Program. It is a lot of information, so it is hard to siphon through all of that. Wherever we can help with an issue or a topic that you might be looking for, I will volunteer for you to email me. The state also has somebody that manages their program, and I call him an encyclopedia. He's pretty good at remembering when I can't remember certain things. So there's a lot of information out there. And just to point out, Jim mentioned Andy Walker's resistant vine activities. We also have a number of other field trials in progress. The board, the glassy wing sharpshooter board, this wine grape industry group that represents those assessment dollars, they hire folks to monitor those field trials. We actually have a viticulture consultant making sure the researchers are managing the vineyards properly so that they're getting the most out of the research. They're very active. Biological control is another element to the program. Unfortunately for us, because we're not a tropical environment like French Polynesia, where they have many, many generations of glassy wing sharpshooter to then feed those biological control agents, we don't see the same level of control. We have most of our citrus areas where this might work are under conventional spray programs. The biological control agents will not survive those conventional spray programs for other pests. So we're real strategic in how we implement the biological control. It tends to be in organic citrus scenarios or in riparian areas where we can't do treatments for glassy wing sharpshooter. But on a whole, it's a tool in our toolbox. It's not the magic bullet that we would like it to be for us, but we're a different situation in California. We're a different climate. Area-wide control program, this is kind of my baby. This is where I started in the program. So we do coordinated vector suppression over large agricultural areas. I'm only going to touch on a couple of areas here, one being our most difficult area to manage glassy wing sharpshooter in, the most challenging. Something I will say is that we've had multiple programs across the state. No two are the same. It would be great if they were all the same, if the grower community was all the same, if the issues we faced were all the same, but that's just not the case. So someone touched on this yesterday. For us in California, we're 2 to 3 generations of glassy wing per year that overwinter as adults. A couple years ago, and I'll try to remember to point this out on my graph, it was actually Rodrigo that pointed out to us as a program that he saw glassy wing sharpshooter actively mating in December. For us, that's not usual. Temperatures were very warm. Typically, we don't see mating and egg laying until mid-March. So we use this biology to try and target how we are going to do our area-wide suppression. So again, Jim mentioned that we target citrus. That's the overwintering host that's green. We assess trap data. We have traps on a quarter-mile grid and permanent hosts around all of our area-wide programs. That allows me as the program manager to assess what we need to do based on the funding level that we have and how many treatments, what timing we're going to use, what chemicals we're going to use. This map is a map of our problem area, and I'm just going to point out it's not a huge area. It's about 13,000 acres. There's only about 3,600 acres of citrus here, but you can see the other host there. Citrus is in orange, cherries is in red, grapes are in purple. This area sits up a little higher than some of our other areas. That temperature increase, because it's a little higher and up in the foothills, glassy wing sharpshooter loves it. Glassy wing sharpshooter has many, many hosts here. We have around that orange citrus belt, around about every 40 acres, we have eucalyptus trees that we don't see dieback because of xylella, but we have problems with glassy wing sharpshooter who love eucalyptus. So managing those populations of glassy wing in the eucalyptus, which is different than a crop system, our labels for our chemicals and what we can do and how we can do it transfers into an ornamental label, which is much more difficult for us to do treatments, much more costly. But so far we've been able to manage that situation in a difficult way. Other issues we look at when we're doing area-wide treatments, we look at past treatments. We look at what the grower's done possibly for another pest that might match up with what we need. We're looking at timing, and I'll touch on that in a second. Coordinated treatments. Again, this is a very strong flyer. If I've got a trap find of glassy wing sharpshooter and I'm treating one grower and we don't treat his neighbor or his next neighbor a quarter of a mile away, glassy wing will just move into the neighbor's citrus. You have to do it in a coordinated effort of everybody treating in order to knock back the population. Grower participation is key. We actually have a position that's funded with the state of what are called treatment coordinators. So what's worked really well for us is to have this non-governmental person going to the growers and asking them to treat. It's a licensed pest control advisor who's well respected in each of the areas that we do this in, has a good rapport with the grower community, works with us as a program, but then also works directly with the grower to answer their questions about what other treatments might be going on, how do they do this glassy wing treatment based on the other issues that they have. Because again, citrus growers don't necessarily care about glassy wing sharpshooter, except that they can't move it in their bulk citrus around the state. It doesn't impact them otherwise unless they have thousands and thousands and thousands of them on the tree. Then it might affect yield and size of fruit, but up until that point, they don't necessarily care about glassy wing. And one little highlight there, grape growers are responsible for their vector treatments. Early on in the program, the grape industry told us, focus your funding on treating the citrus in order to get the citrus growers to do what we want them to do in an area-wide fashion, and we'll take care of our own treatments in the grapes. So our approach in the beginning, and this worked really well for a number of years, was to do a foliar treatment first, to knock out that overwintering population before they mate and lay eggs. Typically that was done February timeframe in the beginning of the program. And then we follow up with a systemic imidacloprid through the drip irrigation system that then gave us months of control afterwards. That worked really well for a number of years. From the beginning of the program in this county, in Kern County, which has multiple areas that are active in the program, but has our main problem area. We have areas in Kern County where we have gone through with an area-wide treatment program and we have never gone back to retreat. Just different growing areas provide different reservoirs of glassy wing. The activities of the growers, the variety of hosts in the area, all of that matters if it's up in the foothills. So you can see we had pretty good control. One thing I'll mention is in those years where we had very low vector populations, there was research going on for Pierce's disease incidence in these areas, and they were down to a 0% incidence of Pierce's disease when we kept the vector down. Things changed. You've heard us already mention resistance. Resistance was absolutely playing a role in the results on this graph, but it was not the only thing playing a role. Especially in 2012, 2013, and 14, the weather I'll say was downright wacky in this area. The cherry trees were blooming, they're not blooming, they're blooming, they're not blooming. We had this up and down temperatures, which we believe affected our uptake of chemical. We had some timing issues with how we were doing treatments, and some of that was not necessarily biologically based on the pest. It was very much based on bureaucracy and getting money in place to be able to do the treatments. The insect doesn't wait for us in government, but sometimes things don't go as smoothly as we would like them to. So in 2015, with those really horrible results, we got a group together. Rodrigo was included in that to have a discussion on how do we move forward, what do we do? And at this time, resistance was not confirmed. It was in the back of our minds. There were studies going on, but it had not been confirmed yet. So what we did and what we decided as a group was to alter our treatment regime. We basically added a treatment in December. That foliar knockdown treatment was pyrethroid focused, because the citrus advisor, Bethcraft and Cardwell for us, they work better in cooler weather. So that was the first knockdown. We followed up with neonicotinoid foliar in February. Again, this is before our resistance issue is confirmed against neonics. And then we did our usual systemic imidacloprid post-citrus bloom. And in 2016, we made a significant impact on that population. That peak is not all based on the area where we did the treatments. It also includes other areas in the county that we ignored because we were focused over here. So in the meantime, we've had to go back to those other areas that are having population increases and focus our treatments back here again with the funding that we have. It's kind of a juggle of what do I have funding for, what can we do, what's the most dire need at this point. Just as an example, I'm going to just mention real quick our Tulare program, which is a county to the north of Kern County, where I just showed you all of those results and graphs. Again, no two programs are the same. For this grower group, what works better for them and works better for them participating with us is a fall foliar treatment and then a follow-up of spring imidacloprid. Again, significant decrease. The numbers on the left are a much different scale than what I had in Kern County. Tulare County, when we first started that program back in 2003, we did 38,000 acres of foliar treatments, followed up with almost 20,000 acres of the imidacloprid. We've never had to go back to that full-scale program again. Subsequent years is hotspots. And our issue, as you can see, increasing last year, is very much related to organic citrus. 80% of that bar is organic citrus. And more than half of that is one organic citrus grove. So the treatment for organics is not great. That's one of our challenges in the program. It's pyganic. We've tried it doing multiple treatments, 7 to 10 days apart. We advise the grower to slow down their rig speed and move through to get an adequate treatment. But that's a challenge. So challenges for us, already talked about the insect and its host range, diverse systems. Existing IPM strategies can influence what a citrus grower wants to do. Organic treatments are obviously an issue. Funding, weather, chemical resistance can all impact us. So again, we are vector focused. The Pierce's disease side of management for this program very much rests on the grape grower. It is in their best interest to rogue out their inoculum. You have to get the inoculum out of the system if you have vectors. You cannot let it sit there. And that doesn't mean chopping it off at the base. That means getting the entire vine out, because suckers can grow up with xylella, and glassy wing especially will be attracted to that. So Temecula in the past and Temecula now has benefited from area-wide management. We have growers there that don't even remember what the issue was back in 2000. So it's a re-education to make sure they're doing what they need to manage and continue that they can grow as a wine grape area.